I'm Sean O'Neill and welcome to my weekly podcast where I chat to the key figures who shape and lead their industries. And today my guest is Matt Edmundson. Matt Edmundson is an e-commerce expert with over 20 years experience. He's going to tell you his story of how he's managed to maneuver the ups and downs of having an e-commerce business.
If you've got, an ash is a beautiful wood. They make cricket bats from it, bows and arrows and all kinds of stuff.
I feel like pausing this podcast now. Stop cutting the wood. We're trimming it up into little, like how much firewood have we got here? Wow.
You should, if you've got good sized trees, you should really talk to a team.
So some of them, like there's some this size, all different size, some smaller, but.
There was a fella down in Wavertree, he, I don't know if he's still there, but he was selling slabs. I guess they would have been maybe 6 foot long, maybe 7 foot long, and a table width. He was selling those for probably about 800 quid, and that was raw and unfinished. I mean, you'd have to go to do a lot of work to turn that into a table. So if I turn those into a table, you'd probably sell them for at least 2.5, 3 grand. And all he had was the slab. So all that happened was you fell the tree, and you get one of those bandsaws on site that just cuts the trees into slabs.
You know, this is starting to sound like every business. Someone gives you the headline figure and about how thousands, millions, billions, and you think, I'm on for a winner here. But really the cost to actually getting that and getting it to the end user is...
Oh yeah, this is why you want to talk to a local timber merchant, because they'll have I mean, to be fair, a bandsaw to do it's not exactly expensive. It'd be about 5 or 6 grand.
I remember being in Indonesia, in Nepal, and there was 2 guys were doing that. They were chopping a tree all day. They basically had the double-ended saw, and that's what they were making. They were making tables out of a double-ended saw. And then eventually they changed positions from being side on to being one below, because obviously they realized they're using different muscles. So one was pushing up, one was pulling down, and then one was going that way. So they're basically like a workout: bench press, dumbbell row, shoulder press.
They're all like,
and we watched them all day. So whenever we were doing one of our treks, and we watched them all day, and we were sitting in the chalet looking out, thinking, well, we're going to be tired doing a 4 or 5 hour hike, and we're watching these guys and they cut it so perfectly. I don't think you'll get it done here like that, but
no, you need a machine here to do it.
Yeah,
a machine. But if you had walnut trees, they're worth way more than gold now. Seriously, walnut is just so.
I'm going to get a flight back to the farms tonight.
See, what wood have we got? What size?
See, if any, I was going to start off today by asking you, what is e-commerce? And you've just described it. Get a product, put it online, find an end user, and make shed loads of money. But I guess it's not that easy, is it? there's all the other bits in between that people don't.
There is.
The people don't see.
There is. Have you ever come across a guy called Albert Goubet? Do you know Albert Goubet? No. He was a guy that started Kwik Save in the 60s. And he was the guy that said, if I put a pallet of baked beans in the supermarket but leave them on the pallet, then you can pick them off yourself and I don't need to pay a member of staff. I can charge you 2p less. You know, that was his whole theory. And he died a couple of years ago. But I knew him, AG, really interesting character. There was a chain of health clubs a few years ago called Total Fitness. And he started those health clubs. And he's done all kinds of things. So he had Kwik Save and he sold that. But his whole thing was, I said to him once, I said, AG, would you ever write a book about your life? And he said, no. And I said, well, why would you not do that? And he gave me a reason, which I probably shouldn't say. But I said to him, well, if you did write a book, what would you call it? And he said, everything costs nothing. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Because everything costs nothing, because clearly stuff costs something. He said, no, he said, everything costs nothing. It's all in the ground. It's all there. He said, the cost is taking it from that to the finished product. And if I can make that as small as possible, he said, I've always got a business that's going to work. And that's how he built his huge empire, I suppose. When he died, he left £1 billion, over £1 billion to charity. I think, I can't remember his exact, how it worked out, but yeah.
How did you meet him?
So years ago, this was back in the day when I used to do health spa design. So I'd design health spas and we'd install them. And so it's when he had his health clubs, Total Fitness, he wanted to do some really interesting health spa stuff. And that's how I met him. I never forget my first conversation with him. I put the phone down on him, which was really fascinating. Just really fascinating. He called up and he was not happy about something. And AG, lovely man. I really liked him, got on really well with him. He did me some really big favors later in life, but he was really abrupt and he could be very coarse with people. Old school, real old school kind of guy. And the first day he called me up, he was not happy about something. I'm like, listen, if you don't stop talking to me like that, I'm going to end the conversation. So
And you knew who he was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I said, I don't mind having a conversation. I don't mind sorting the problem out, but let's have a civil conversation. He just went. So he just called me back a few minutes later and go, did you just put the phone down on me? And I said, I told you that I would. So if we can have a civil conversation, we're going to get on really well. And ever since then, we got on super fine. Yeah, super well. Yeah, really great guy. I owe him a lot, actually, AG.
And was that how you got into your e-commerce business?
No, so that came about because in 1997, I remember it really clearly. I was working for a company called Seven Leisure, and Seven Leisure was the health spa company. It was owned and run by a really good friend of mine, a guy called Simon. And a friend of mine, a guy called Paul Gilligan, came to see me. Or I went to see him. I can't remember, we were chatting away. And he said to me, Matt, do you know anything about these things called websites? Because this is back in the late 90s. No one really knew anything about the internet or websites back then. And he said to me, do you know anything about them? I said, well, I know that they cost thousands of pounds because some good friends of mine had a company at the time called Webshed, which is now called Mando. And there was three of them, and they were based on London Road, and they would sit and write code the old-fashioned way. And so I said, I know they're going to cost thousands. He said, well, I don't want to spend thousands because I want to get a website for my church. And I said to him, well, look, listen, I know there's some software out there that can help create websites. I haven't got a clue how it works. But I used to do coding when I was a young teenager,
Was that even a thing? Sorry, Matt. I know you're relatively young, but
no, it's just the 80s. I mean, this was back in the day where you could put the phone into a device which was called a modem, but you had to put the handset into a box to do it. And we wrote code. There was a few friends of ours, school lunch times, we wrote code. I managed to hack into some of the major banks of the UK at the time. I'm not going to, nothing happened, by the way, before anyone was prosecuted. But this is what we did.
So how did you make your money then? Suitcases.
Something like that. But no, so he came to see me, and I'd not written any code for years. And I said, surely it can't be that different. Little did I know. And so he bought that software. I said, if you buy that software, I'll write the website. So that's just one of those chance conversations that I did not think through the consequences of. Just, so many of them happen, don't they? And so he bought the software. It cost 800 quid. I figured out, using that software, how to create a website for him and his church, created one for me and my then fiance, my now wife. This is going back 27, because we've been married 26 years. I created a website called mattandsharon.com, just playing around with stuff. And yeah, that's kind of how it all started. And then a few years later, I carried on doing that.
Were you doing it just out of enjoyment at the start?
Yeah. It's just like a side hustle. Yeah. I did it as a favor. Well, I say as a favor, he bought me the software. So
that lured you into getting married? lured your wife into saying, yes, you've got a website.
Yeah. Let's go.
And you done your mate a favor.
Yeah, and that's how it all started. And it was a big side hustle. And then a few years later, I left the sauna game and did it full time. And that's 2002. We did our first e-commerce website. E-commerce was starting to become more and more well, it was still very uncommon, but I was hearing more about it. And so I just called a friend of mine, just said to him, I'm going to create an online site. It's like, what's one of those? What are you talking about? So we're just going to flog stuff online. and see how it works. And he's like, okay. I say, well, can I sell your stuff? He owned a company which sold tanning products, which is what you put on your face when you go on a tanning bed, just to accelerate it. I don't even know, to be fair. I just needed a product that I could sell. And I said, would you mind if I sell your products? But I don't want to buy a load of stock. As I sell them, can you send them to me and I'll ship them out? Because you didn't need next day delivery and all that nonsense back then. And he was like, sure, man. And so that's how it all started, 2002. Did that website, started. I remember really clearly the first day I woke up in the morning to an email and somebody had bought products from me whilst I was asleep. So I woke up richer than when I went to sleep. And I remember at the time thinking, that is just magical. That's insane. And so
that shows where you were in your life compared to mine, because I had just joined a dating site in 2003.
Right.
And I remember waking up in the morning to 3 prospective dates. And I remember thinking, fucking hell, that's just magical. But then again, I'm a little bit younger, so yeah.
A little bit, yeah, just a little bit.
So I was thinking, I've got dates, and you're thinking, wow, I've just made money. But
Yeah.
but the principle of it is,
Yeah.
if you look back and think, it's going to be the same in 20 years if you know now.
Yeah, what you knew then.
Or if you know then, yeah. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
whatever way it is, you'd go. Well, you just know the path that you would choose.
Yeah.
Were you making money all these years, or was there times you were thinking, what the hell am I actually doing?
Oh yeah, there's plenty of those times. Geez, we made money at the start. So that first business I built, and I sold it to the guy that I was buying the tanning products from. 6 months later, he wanted to buy it up because he saw how much product we were selling. He's like, well, he bought that business. So in 6 months, I started my first online business and sold it, which was all a bit insane. But what happened in 2006, we started a beauty business. So a friend of mine, a guy called Andy, who's such a legend, Andy, he had a health club in Jersey. He wanted to make some extra side income. So he had some beauty products in his health club because they had these little treatment rooms. He said, what happens if I put those online? I don't know. We built him a little website, and we thought the website was launched August 2006. Our best estimate at the time was you'd probably sell about 10 grand's worth of product between now and the end of the year. And he's like, well, that's all right. That's going to add a few grand to the bottom line. And so we thought if we could hit £10,000 in sales, we'd do super well. But by the time that Christmas rolled round, it didn't do £10,000 in sales. We did 400 and something thousand pounds in sales. It just went nuts. And this was back in the day where it was easy to just build a website, build it and they'll come, just throw it online. Somebody's going to find it. This was pre-Google ads, pre-Facebook ads, pre all that sort of stuff. And I had no idea how people were finding the site, but they were finding it and they were buying lots and lots of products. And so that website took off, went viral, did everything it was supposed to do. But in 2012, we'd moved that business from Jersey to Liverpool for a whole bunch of reasons, which I can get into, but it's slightly boring. But we moved it to Liverpool where I was running the operation. And I got a letter from one of our key suppliers. This was January 2012, I think it was 2013, somewhere around there. We'd just come off the back of our best year ever. 85% of our sales were one particular brand of product. And I got a letter, not a phone call, not a meeting, a letter from that brand early January saying, we're changing our pricing policy. So the more you buy, the more you pay, in effect, was what they said. And I'm like,
is it surely not the opposite way around?
Yeah, it's what standard business protocol is, right? But no, that was what they said. The more you buy, the more you pay. And this is where I learned a valuable lesson in e-commerce about being over-reliant on one supplier. My prices had to go up by 30%. My sales halved within a matter of weeks. I had to let staff go. And it took a little while for that to actually start making money again. And so just because we were big, we were doing millions in turnover, it was horrific in many ways.
In hindsight, would it have been better keep trading and make almost no money than to your sales to drop and your staff to let them go?
In hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? I call it my £38 million lesson, because I reckon that's what we lost in sales from that one letter, that one supplier. Were they right? Were they wrong? I don't know.
So they lost as well?
No.
Or is it because they had so many other
No, what
people
they
buying
did,
off them?
what they did at the time was they saw how much money we were doing online. There was probably us and a few other websites in the UK which built that brand in the UK.
Okay.
This is under their own admittance. And so they got to a size where they're turning over quite a bit of money, but through internet channels. So they did what everyone else is going to do. They're going to go, well, why don't we do the website?
Yeah.
We can cut these guys out, go direct to consumer, and therefore our profits go absolutely crazy. And so that's what they did. And they eventually sold that company to Unilever for, I don't know, hundreds of millions, because the profit margin they enjoyed was so massive then going direct to consumer. But basically they squeezed and squeezed and squeezed the guy in the middle. I think in hindsight, I would have, at the start of that journey back in 2006, when it all took off, I would not have gone, we're doing really well with this brand, let's keep going. I would have gone, let's go and get 30 other brands. So that when that price hike came, we wouldn't have been so reliant on that one supplier. Does that make sense? And that was my £38 million lesson. There are 7 areas of e-commerce, and which we now know about, but at the time we were just so hyper-focused. I use the analogy, we're a bit like the guy that goes to the gym and just does nothing but arms. Do you know what I mean? But forgets leg day. And that's what we were like as a business at the time. It was a very expensive lesson though.
Sounds like my 2008 lesson.
Yeah.
All my eggs was in the property basket, and I had my XXX whatever pounds it was lesson as well. So yeah, nobody put their eggs in one basket. In saying that, I was with I'm going to get this slightly wrong, but the global manager of Hewlett Packard recently. Yeah. And what an incredible guy. And 65%, so the ex-global manager of Hewlett Packard, 65% of his wealth is in one share or stock or business. But not all of it. Yeah, just 65%.
Not all of it. Well, it's that old phrase, isn't it? Put all your eggs in one basket, but watch that basket.
Well, I suppose, yeah.
And I'd come off the back of, when I was doing the saunas and the steam rooms, we had a really good relationship with the company called Clafs. So we imported from Germany. Had a really good relationship with those guys, all on a handshake, all very happy. And I naively had grown up in business assuming that people were like that. But this company wasn't. And that's where so I think you can have all your eggs in one basket, but I think you just have to be really aware of what that basket is. Do you know what I mean? And I think you have to be really sure in it. And I think in hindsight, I just took a lot of things for granted.
It must be hard to have loyalty and values if you have a digital platform and you're dealing with other people digitally, and a lot of the time you actually don't get to see their face or have a conversation like this. Yeah. Because in the old days, you shook somebody's hand and that was the deal. Yeah. You agreed on the spot, and from what I'm led to believe long before my time is people were extremely honourable. But then again, I suppose you had to see that person again. Yeah. Where now you can deal with anyone in the world. Yeah. You probably don't know if half of them are real. So they could vanish at any time. Yeah. I found that to protect myself and keep my eggs not in one basket, as I diversified in the last 15 years, I would sort of use property to keep my wealth and have other income streams just to generate a profit. Yeah. And then if that falls down, at least I've got something to fall back on. So do you think the market to set up an e-commerce business now, it's the greatest time ever or a more difficult time ever? Because you said then you just went viral because there was lack of competition. Or does it depend on who you are?
I think the market's different. But, when was the best time to set up an e-commerce website? 2002. When's the next best time to set up an e-commerce website? Today. right? You can always look back and go, well, it was so easy back then, and it was so, honestly, it was an absolute piece of cake, and it's not like that anymore.
But did people know it was easy back then? Or did they think?
No, we were just a Wild West. No one had a clue. We were all making it up as we went along. And that was the fun of it, I suppose, in many ways. But no, it's very, very different now. But I still think, in the UK, a third of retail sales are online. Well, just over a third, isn't it now? Almost 40%. So I still think you need both. I think you need online and I think you need offline. And the businesses that are going to win are going to marry those two things really well together. But yeah, I remember asking Gube once, going back to my stories of AG, I remember asking him, I said, AG, if you lost everything today, all your money, what would you do? I was super curious to know what a super wealthy guy would do if he had to start again today. And he started out making money in supermarkets. That's what he did. He started off with a barra, and then, it grew into shops, which grew into supermarket. So I said to him, what would you do? Knowing everything that you know now, what's looking for that industry that was going to make the millions? And he said, I'd go into supermarkets. I'm like, really? It's like, yeah. I'm like, but you've got Tesco's, you've got Asda, you've got all these big name competitors. Why would you do that? And he said, because that's what I know. And I thought it was a really interesting answer. And I think if I lost everything today, what would I do tomorrow? I'd set up an online business. Why? Because that's what I know. Do you know what I mean? It makes total sense in my head to do it. I don't understand why people don't do it, but then that's what I know.
I've been in some ways the opposite, where I've always tried to fight the tide of online and I take my money from the bank and go and spend it in a shop. I sort of think that if I can sort of stay, at least there's always going to be a shop there, I'm thinking, or I'm trying to maybe reduce my digital time. But it is tempting when you go to buy. Recently I've been buying radiators for a refurbishment of a house, and I've gone to the plumbing shop and I've said, right, what can you do me on the price of these radiators? I've gone away and I've looked online and they've given me their discount, can't do any less.
Yeah. And
then I'm getting them 30% cheaper online. You're thinking, you just can't go to the shop then, can you?
Yeah.
And I'm nearly begging the guy to say, look, I'm not going to give you that price. And they're like, oh, well, that's our best price. And you're like, okay, credit card, job done, delivered to your home, no hassle, providing you obviously know that the product's the same.
Yeah.
And I'm probably the same. If I look back, the bit that maybe is not oversold is, if you to do it all again, you'll be sitting in your room or your office 12 to 18 hours a day doing what you know.
Yeah.
You're not just going to make it back overnight and within a year later, you hear of the people that go bankrupt and then all of a sudden they're worth millions again.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they've dedicated the next period in their life, 7 days a week, all day, all night, doing what they know to get it back.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's definitely, so there's no easy hack for online. I remember I went to you did a really great e-commerce, I'm going to butcher the explanation, when you did the courses online.
Oh, the masterclass.
The masterclasses on e-commerce. And I found how fascinating it was because it looked so easy. But when you do your step-to-step guide of what you should do, it's because you know what to do.
Yeah.
You can imagine all these people that have gone through your masterclass on how to set up and then next week they've gone, right, step one. Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Because I instantly thought, actually, this looks pretty easy here. Yeah, by 2 weeks later, I just, I thought, you know what,
It's the same with property, right? Because we talk about this all the time. So you do property, and for you, it's an absolute doddle. In your head, you know exactly what you do. Whereas I'm like, goodness me, I've lost a lot of money in property. I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's the same because you've done it for so long.
So have I.
Well, yeah, but yeah, but you learn from that. I just went, I've lost money, I'm out. I kind of dabbled. Whereas with e-commerce, I've lost a lot of money, but I've kind of worked at it and figured it out and stuck with it. And so
that'd be a good question. You know, if we had a survey now, who out there has not lost a lot of money and become successful, even if they've stuck at the same, sector?
Yeah.
But I don't think it's even possible. How can you go through? You go through a year or two of quick wins, but you're going to get stuck. Something has to go wrong.
Something's got to go wrong. Otherwise, the level of arrogance and hubris would just be immense, wouldn't it? I remember when we did Jersey, and Jersey was turning over millions, we just thought we'd cracked e-commerce, we'd cracked the code. So we thought, let's go and set up another site. And we set up a site called Jersey Gift Company. Absolutely failed. And we're just like, oh, bugger, perhaps we don't know anything. Yeah.
Yeah, no, well, the good thing is I'm sure you regrouped and realized what you did wrong.
Yeah.
And I've always seen myself as somebody that's been reasonably humble. I say reasonably because obviously I'm sure I've had my moments, and appreciative. However, in about 2005, 2006, technically everything in my whole life had gone like that. And I made such a whopper of a comment. Makes me cringe. But I guess that's what I knew. Someone says to me, you're doing extremely well. The banks had started ringing me up saying, do you want overdrafts? And, there was millions in the bank account. There was millions in contracts. That wasn't just in the bank account. There was all that, the futures looked amazing. And someone says to me, wow, where do you think it's going to go? And my stupid comment, I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember, but I remember reading that Richard Branson, by the age of his mid-20s, had made just a few million and then had that difficult time where he was then losing money. And I said something along the lines of, well, I'm still on a trajectory. If I keep going like this, I'll be like Richard Branson. What a dickhead I was. Because anyway, not going to bore anyone with that story over and over again, but ultimately I ended up not like Richard Branson. But learned the lesson.
That's probably a good thing. There's only enough room in this planet for one Richard Branson.
But my ego check, my ego. I think I mentioned Richard Branson because I actually just finished reading his book.
Yeah.
And I thought it was, it was a good read. But that was definitely, if my ego was going to go to a place that was not good, that definitely took it down a peg, or I had to lick my wounds and like you then.
Yeah.
So do you, when a fail happens, do you actually take note, or how do you then remember not to make them mistakes again? Do you have to then speak? Because in the digital world, it's not just you on your own then at this stage. You've got a team of people, staff, systems. So do you all have to sit together and then figure out what went wrong?
I think it depends on the degree of failure. So if e-commerce, in effect, successful e-commerce sites are built on understanding, on making things break, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a page on the website. You won't know this as a visitor, but when you come to my website, you will see one of 3 or 4 pages that I'm testing at any one point in time, right? So I'm going to show you this one, I'm going to show that guy over there, that website, and I'm going to see which one converts better. So I'm constantly testing. And so in essence, I'm constantly finding what's working, what's not working. Well, that one's failed, so we'll push that. If I make the button green instead of red, what happens? And we're always doing these minor tweaks. So you're always putting into the system failure. You want to know what doesn't work. And that is wonderful because that tells you what does work. But then there are the big failures, the epic failures where it just all goes very, very wrong. And so I think it all depends on the degree. I remember when I got that letter, and I almost lost the business overnight, that, the price letter. The one thing I did then, which is something that I've always done since, is when you get these big, epic, cataclysmic events happen, I wrote a book. And I sat myself inside a cafe, and I just wrote down my experiences like I was writing it for someone to read. No one's ever read that. Well, actually 3 people have read that book. But I was writing it in such a way that if someone read it, they would understand what was going on. Now, I'm sure there's some psychological benefits to doing this. I'm sure there's a principle that I've not quite understood. But just writing all this stuff down, what's going on, what do we see, what can we pivot, what can we do, where have we come, always remembering your history, where have we come from, being grateful for that and celebrating that, but also vision for the future. And I
hope you bought more than 1 cup of tea the whole time you're writing that book.
Yeah, from the coffee
You're the
shop.
guy that fucking buys 1 cup of tea and sits there all day.
That's me. And so the coffee shop was right under our office, and I'd go back, I'd write a chapter, and I'd give that chapter to the staff. And they would read it, and we would talk about it, because it was a great way for me to communicate, because I wasn't necessarily very verbose, but it was a great way for me to communicate both my anger, my sadness at what was going on, but also my hope for a better future. And they're all our key staff in my company now stayed with me during that time, and they all read that book. And we've come through a lot together as a team. You know, we've had people working for us now 16, 17 years, I think, just maybe even longer actually. Come through thick and thin. We've come through 3 or 4 of these cataclysmic events. And I just think writing stuff out like that, journaling, writing a book, whatever it is that you're going to do.
Do they do it as well?
No, but I was the guy, it was my company. And I think when you're, certainly in our company, it's not always true in every other company, but in our company, I'm the entrepreneur, I'm the visionary. I have to paint the picture of what tomorrow looks like. And I have to bring that sense of hope and possibility. And I think that's quite an entrepreneurial skill. And so we would talk about it together, and everyone was like, you know, I got some lovely messages from the staff after they would read, you know, the stuff, and they're still with me. So yeah.
It's incredible how the discovery of being able to write. My writing started a number of years ago, where I'm probably at a stage where all else was not great, and I started writing, of which now is about 200,000 words, I'm told. It's now getting typed up. But through the process of writing things down and sharing my stories, and if someone's in need, or a good friend of mine that's close that I think we need to connect, or they need a bit of a helping hand, I do a handwritten letter to them. And that's probably one of the most powerful things that I've done on my own bat, without, you know, with my own effort, just a pen and a piece of paper, just raw, your own thought, cost nothing. Cup of tea, cup of coffee. That's but I think maybe it's just because I'm explaining this to people, or coming up with these conversations. I think it's becoming more like that now, because I've now got handwritten letters from my grandparents that they wrote to each other, and I'm starting to look back, and that's what we did in the old days to connect. So your staff are with you, not because you just pay them well. They're with you because you connected to them in the days where that chapter is what they needed. They didn't need oh, come on guys, there's a pay rise, we'll see it through. They got to know you through the failings.
It's I think it's a really powerful thing. I think you're totally right. I remember in the early days of Jersey, the online business, we would handwrite letters or notes to staff, to customers. Customer loyalty goes up. They get these little handwritten notes. Just so, like you say, someone's in trouble, or someone just needs just write me a little handwritten note. I think I was at a show, a conference that I was involved with called Sub Summit. I was there 3 weeks ago in Dallas, Texas. And one of the exhibits in that show, and I still don't quite know how I feel about it, to be fair, what they were demonstrating was a robot that in effect you could program with your handwriting style. And so this robot had a pen and in effect was just writing postcard after postcard. So it wasn't like I wrote the postcard, copied it, took it to a printer's because that just looks cheap and nasty. No. You could see the indentations. You could see like someone had written it with a pen, and they're very clever robot mimicking the human arm. And you're like, that is insane. And so their whole thing was the power of the handwritten note. You can just get a robot to do it for you.
I forget what book I read that in. It's one of them books that we all probably have read. I thought, hey, I'm going to give that a go. But it definitely works. Yep. So it's the simple thing with all this technology and the ability to make bazillions overnight. It's back to what our ancestors did that actually is equally as powerful.
And it's also good for you because like me writing that stuff down in that style when it was all going very wrong, 10 years later, I pick that book up and I read it and I remember. And there's just something about that where you become eternal. You just become grateful, and you're so aware of what happened because of what you wrote on that piece of paper. Do you know what I mean? You feel that emotion again, and you're like, yeah, it's chalk and cheese. Do you know what I mean? We came through it, and here we are. And I just, you just remember the team, super grateful, and it's good to build that old-fashioned word, memorial, to have that remembrance of something that happened. I think is really, really powerful.
So I always come to you for e-commerce advice. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm like my dad when he says, "Oh, you're the website. Can you?" So I come to you and you decipher what I'm talking about. But e-commerce is at the biggest it's ever been. There's a lot of younger people that's going to be not just younger, but people trying to figure out what they want to do in their careers. And there is a lot of interest in setting up their own e-commerce businesses.
Yeah.
What would you say to them? What's the pitfalls? What do they need to do?
Old school. I get, it's one of the big questions actually. How do you win in e-commerce? If I'm going to be, if I'm setting up now, like my son's thinking about doing it, what do I do? The best book you can read is How to Make Friends and Influence People. Go old school, because the principles of old school marketing haven't changed. And what happens is in digital now, we've got so caught up in what's the latest trend, what's the latest silver bullet. Should I do a TikTok shop? How do I do Facebook ads? Should I do this? Do you know what I mean? What's the latest thing that's going to make me money? That will make you money today, but something that will make you money over 20 years. Basic principles: how to make friends, how to influence people, what works, how do you persuade someone, how do you understand the concepts of demand, how do you treat people super well. If you can do that, you can win at e-commerce. But what you can't do is you can't win at e-commerce without knowing that stuff. Does that make sense? And a lot of people come in and they go, right, fidget spinners were, a guy came to me, fidget spinners had done their thing. Do you remember the things that you had in your hands? And he said, I've gone and bought a container load of them. I've got, a container load of them sat there. Can you help me sell them? I says, no. Why would I want to do that? Because that trend lasted for 6 months. And his whole thing was, I've got fidget spinners, I need a website, sell them, bish, done. And you can make money in that. There are people that do that super well. That's not me. And I think actually to win in the long term, the foundational principles are old school. They are still old school. And I still think that Dale Carnegie book is still the book to read for e-commerce. I really do.
That's how our old school friendship started. Mm-hmm. We were in a CrossFit gym together.
Yep.
Got to know each other, trusted each other, give and took advice from each other. Mm-hmm. And I guess, we added value to each other.
Yeah.
Anyway, exactly. Matt, thank you for coming here today. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I do hope that people out there got to get some valuable lessons. Where can they find you?
Right now. Just go to mattedmundson.com. It's online. Or find me on LinkedIn, Matt Edmundson. Just search for, here's the thing, because I have the same name as quite a famous radio DJ. If you search for Matt Edmundson, he often comes up. Yeah. But his surname is MONDSON, whereas I'm MUNDSON. Mm-hmm. And so just get the right one. I do get messages on Twitter all the time. Can you play this on the radio? You know what I mean? Can you play this song on the radio? And I'm like, yeah, sure, just keep listening. So, yeah, just search for Matt Edmundson, you'll find me.
Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please consider watching some of our other fascinating chats here. If you'd like to stay up to date with all the latest podcasts, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell below.